to take over the management, alleging that Mr. Tellis was a poor manager. Soon after those articles ran in June, Mr. Tellis lost his primary election for public administrator, and Mr. Gehrman wrote about that as well. Mr. Tellis responded to the articles written by Mr. Gehrman and claimed they were politically motivated, that they were unfair, and he generally disputed what was alleged in those articles. And following this post by Robert Tellis, Jeff Gehrman wrote another article about Robert Tellis, alleging many of the things that I had previously discussed. Mr. Tellis also engaged in I guess saying unfavorable things about Mr. Gehrman on Twitter. He accused Mr. Gehrman of going through his trash. He accused Mr. Gehrman of being a bully. He accused Mr. Gehrman of threatening him, all over Twitter, which I guess is now X. Meanwhile, the police do more investigation, and they learned that the Tellis family has a maroon Yukon Denali SUV. And that is important, obviously, because that is seen in the video connected to the assailant. So the search for video, where it sort of started in Gehrman's neighborhood, now focuses kind of on the areas in between Tellis's neighborhood and Gehrman's neighborhood. And this is not just like, hey, is there any video out there? They really, really look for video. They have a grid, they assign officers, and everybody is looking for any video of this SUV between the two residences. Now, the police still had their timeline where they could go back, and they knew that Jeff Gehrman was alive and well at 9:03 a.m. on the 2nd. And they map out the route between Robert Tellis's house and Jeff Gehrman's house. Now, Mr. Tellis lives on a street called Spanish Steps, and to get out of his neighborhood, you go down a street called Silk Tassel, and then you can turn on a street called Red Hills Road. And on the morning of the murder of September the 2nd, officers found video of Mr. Tellis's SUV leaving his neighborhood on the morning of the murder. To give you some reference point, Mr. Gehrman's residence, as I said, is on Bronze Circle. Streets in his area include Wintergreen Drive and Rock Springs Drive, and detectives go all over that area to see if there's any video that they can find of that Yukon in the neighborhood. And they find on the morning of the murder that that Yukon was present on Rock Springs Drive, and they collect that video. Again, the cross street for Bronze Circle, Mr. Gehrman Street, is Wintergreen Drive. They collect video from Wintergreen Drive as well, and they see the red SUV or maroon SUV in the area as well. They see that maroon SUV interact with kind of workers at a construction site. And the SUV does not go in a direct linear line anywhere. It's picked up on cameras at different times in the area of Jeff Gehrman's neighborhood. One of the cameras picks up the driver of the SUV. You can kind of see that orange clothing, and it appears that the driver is the only one present. At some point, the cameras in that neighborhood pick up this individual getting out of the car. And the individual is seen on Wintergreen, walking past Bronze Circle, going south on Wintergreen, going north, kind of meandering around the neighborhood near Jeff Gehrman's house. Ultimately, the individual is seen traveling in the direction of Jeff Gehrman's house on Bronze Circle. going further towards Gehrman's house on Bronze Circle, and then ultimately to the side of the house. And then in sequence, after the assailant goes to the side of the house, that's when Mr. Gehrman opens his garage door. He goes to the side and he's attacked. The assailant leaves Mr. Gehrman there in the rocks, has his bag with him, and walks down the street. He goes further down the street toward Wintergreen, and he ultimately goes back to that maroon SUV. That maroon SUV, though, then proceeds south on Wintergreen, and it actually heads back in the direction of Gehrman's house. And you can kind of see it parked in front. The individual gets out, goes back towards where the body is. And then the individual returns back to the Yukon. The Yukon leaves Bronze Circle, the cul-de-sac for Jeff Gehrman. It goes back on Wintergreen Drive. It goes west on Washington. It goes on Rampart. Goes on Apple. And it goes back to Silk Tassel and Mr. Tellis's neighborhood. So with this video evidence and the evidence of the conflict between Mr. Gehrman and Mr. Tellis, the police seek a search warrant on September the 7th, and they want to get a DNA sample from Mr. Tellis. They want to seize his phone, and they also want to search his house. On September 7th, the police make contact with Mr. Tellis, and they photograph him all over. In particular, they photograph his hands, and they notice on one of his fingers he has a Band-Aid. They ask him to remove that Band-Aid, and he has a cut injury on one of his fingers. While detectives are photographing and getting that DNA sample from Mr. Tellis, other detectives go to Mr. Tellis's house and execute a search warrant there. So they go to the house that very same day on September the 7th, and some of the detectives are looking through the living room area of the house, and they're kind of focused on the end of the couch, sort of underneath. They see a shoe, and there's actually a Ziploc bag on the right side of the photo. They examine the shoe. They find the companion shoe, but that shoe has been cut in half and sort of destroyed. And the bag, that baggie that was underneath that couch, actually contains pieces of the shoe as well. So they collect that evidence. And the reason why that was important for them is they compared it to the shoes worn by that assailant.
All right, outlining some good evidence the state plans to present in this trial against Robert Tellis, including that shoe that's been destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, you got to wonder what he's thinking sitting there. Again, he proclaims his innocence, but that is some pretty strong evidence.
I would agree with you. We do need to take a break. When we come back, the prosecutor continues to lay out that evidence that they say was found that connects the defendant to the crime. Keep it here on your front row seat to justice. Before we head back to court in the investigative reporter murder trial, let's bring in federal trial attorney Alexis Rosenberg. Alexis, of course, thank you for being with both of us today. Let me ask you about so far what we've heard from the state's opening about what they expect the evidence will prove in this case. And we're watching as you hear the search warrant executed on his home, the chairs kicked back as if he's been watching TV or hanging out on his couch. There's one shoe, and lo and behold, there's another shoe cut in half with part of it destroyed in a baggie. He claims evidence was planted. It seems a little contrived to think that he would cut up the shoe, leave it in a baggie under his couch.
Judge Ashley, I agree with you. I mean, if he was set up as he's alleging, I mean, this was a major setup because there's a cut up shoe, there's blood. Also, what they were showing with the hand. I mean, we have that major injury on the finger as well. I think it's far-fetched. It'll be interesting to see what evidence the defense puts on about this alleged setup. But I don't think that anybody's buying this at this point. But then again, it's opening statements, so we're at a very early stage.
That's fair.
Yeah, Alexis, I want to talk a little bit about the motive here. I mean, the claim by the state essentially is that it's about bad press, right? It got in this bad press. But I would tend to argue that the bad press then led to him losing his position as an elected official. And we all know elected officials like being elected officials. Mm-hmm. That to me sounds like a real motive here.
I agree with you, Michael. That sounds like the real motive, that his political career was damaged, his perception by the public was damaged, and I mean, his ego was hurt. So I agree with you. That is the real motive. I think that just having bad press, I mean, what is the saying? Sometimes, even bad press is good press. I think it's really the fact that he lost that election and he wasn't saving face in the general public.
Yeah, and I think when you start putting these pieces together like a puzzle, I mean, this puzzle really fits together very, very well.
So far, it does.
But in a minute, we're going to get to hear the defense's opening statement, see what they have to say. But right now, the state is continuing to give its opening statement, so let's get right back in that courtroom.
On September the 2nd, they don't just search in the house. They search in the garage as well, and there's a gray kind of tub in the garage that sort of stores stuff. And they take a closer look, and they look at that bag there, and they photograph it and impound it, and they believe the bag is significant in their search because the assailant was carrying a bag that's exactly like the one they found in Mr. Tellis's house. So they find the shoes, they find the bag. they do a search in this garage, which is quite crowded with stuff. And on this, at the bottom of this red tool cabinet, they find a bag from, like a grocery bag from Sprouts. And inside that bag, they find a hat that has been cut up as well. And the hat, of course, is significant because it has the same identifying characteristics as the hat worn by the assailant. So this is all happening on September the 7th. Detectives return Mr. Tellis back to his house on September the 7th, and they actually rush to process his DNA sample that same day. And it's determined that that foreign DNA that was found in those fingernail clippings taken from autopsy of Jeff Garriman, that foreign DNA is consistent with Robert Tellis. So they go back to his residence with the intent of taking him into custody for the murder of Jeff Garriman. And they come to find eventually that he has inflicted injuries on himself, the suicide attempt, and they have to transport him to the hospital for treatment, but he is taken into custody. After that occurs, remember how I said that? They took his phone as well. They're able to see some of the messages that occurred between Jeff Garriman and Robert Tellis. One of those messages is from Mr. Garriman on May the 10th. You can see it at the bottom of 2022. Where Mr. Garriman says, "Hi, this is Jeff Garriman from the Review Journal. I'm putting together a story on your office. I've talked to several employees who have said you have created a hostile work environment. They also say you've had an inappropriate relationship with one of your staffers, and I very much wanted to talk to you and sort of get your side of the story." After that message was sent, Robert Tellis actually does agree to be interviewed by Jeff Garriman, and he invites him to the public administrator's office, and he sits down with him for an interview. And this is the story that ran digitally for the Review Journal.
The Clark County Public Administrator's Office has been mired in turmoil and internal dissension for 2 years, with workers claiming emotional stress, bullying, and favoritism. Robert Tellis, who leads the office, has also faced allegations of an inappropriate relationship with a coworker, Roberta Lee Kennett. In an interview with Review Journal investigative reporter Jeff Garriman, Tellis disputed several complaints.
What is your reaction to the allegations from these employees that you have created a hostile environment in this office?
I earlier introduced you to the other 7 team members, and they're folks who've all come with a great attitude, and they work hard. And together, them and I, we are what is making the difference with the performance of this office. I've done my best to try to make everyone happy, but again, it's got to be within a certain framework. People just cannot get to do whatever they want, and it's unfortunate that, we've got some people who were here from before who were basically trying to railroad me, and again, you do those other folks, they're happy, they're dedicated, and we're just here to do a good job.
Tellis, who's up for re-election in the June primary, blames a handful of old-timers for claims about a hostile environment in the office.
Again, no matter what type of gestures I try to make to smooth things over, to make sure that they're happy, they just don't, it's nonstop. And again, like I said, it's hard for me to make sure I am a cheerleader for the folks who are doing really good work, when I've got these other folks who are constantly, surveilling me, constantly trying to sabotage the office. But, we're doing it, but it's hard.
Tellis denied allegations of any improper relationship with Lee Kennett.
And when you hear people raise these allegations about your and personal relationship that you have, what do you say to people about that?
Honestly, it's not true. I said, you know, all of my friends, all my family know how much I love my wife. And if you look at
All right, we're going to step aside here. We'll take in another break. When we come back, the prosecution wraps up its, what I think is a very good opening